From Hanoi, and what a day it's been already. I'm Bill Hemmer, live here in Vietnam. We're coming up on the 11th hour here, where President Trump just arrived ahead of his second face-to-face meeting with Chairman Kim. Chairman Kim opting to go along the rails in China for what amounted to a 60-hour trip. Their two-day summit begins tomorrow with a whole lot on the line for both sides. Here's Michael Anton, former national security spokesman for President Trump, a bit earlier in our program today.
Regime survival is the fundamental priority of the North Koreans and of Kim Jong-un. So this question of dangling carrots about economic development in front of them, it really boils down to whether Kim has had a change of heart, whether he thinks that economic development, money, capitalism, prosperity is a better guarantor of regime survival than a nuclear program.
That was from a bit earlier. President Trump's been on the ground for 2 hours. Chairman Kim's been here about 12 hours. John Roberts been here for 2 days now, live here in Hanoi. And John, let's begin with you across town in the Vietnamese capital. Okay. One moment, we'll make a connection here. Roberts is here, but a little momentary glitch here. Sanders will try to bring in his signal there. I gotcha. You know, the thing that John was talking with us about 2 hours ago was the move that happened with some of the press corps that's following Chairman Kim. They checked into a hotel. They paid for it ahead of time. And when Chairman Kim's delegation arrived today at the hotel, they ordered the press to get up and leave, take all your equipment and get out. I mean, that's really, it's remarkable stuff. It doesn't happen this way ever, I don't believe. When we get John back on the line here, he'll explain a little bit of like his own history with this and how high a demand that is for any world leader. Regardless of whether you're from North Korea or not. So I got the connection now with John. Let's move across town right now. We'll get John Roberts in a moment here when we establish that connection here in Hanoi. But that's a remarkable thing, Sandra. I mean, it's really, you don't see it. Now they're scrambling to find a new room. But that shows you the level of sensitivity and the security on behalf of the North Korean leader. They are paranoid when they come here to Vietnam, and there is evidence of that already.
There was a bit of a mishap, too, when Kim Jong-un was stepping off of the train, and one of his most immediate security detail didn't realize he had walked off the train car and ended up running towards him. And then, of course, there was the moments where his motorcade was moving down the street and his security detail running alongside him in the vehicle. Really something to see all of that, and this, as the president did tweet a short time ago, it was just less than an hour ago, Bill, that he had just arrived in Vietnam. He thanked all the people for the great reception in Hanoi. He went on to say tremendous crowds and so much love. And Bill, crowds there are. Ed Henry was down in the streets a short time ago, and certainly it is the 11 o'clock p.m. hour there, and there's a lot of activity long into the evening there ahead of the big day tomorrow.
Yeah, Hanoi is a sprawling city. It's seen major growth over the past 10 years. I mean, as a country, Vietnam's been growing about 7% for about 6 years running. And that's growth that any country anywhere in the world would take. It's truly remarkable stuff. But they're fired up. They want to show the world that they can do it, frankly. And we're about to see how starting tomorrow morning.
It's hard to believe it's been 8 months now since that first historic summit in Singapore. And here we are today. More from you in a bit, Bill, from Hanoi. Meanwhile, the big day in Washington as well. Right now, Michael Cohen is behind closed doors to the Senate Intelligence Committee. The White House slamming the president's former lawyer and the hearing itself. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live on the Hill with more. Catherine, hello.
Well, thank you, Sandra. We are just 2 hours into the Cohen testimony, and just take a walk with me because I want to get you situated. Right now, we're on the ground floor of the Hart Senate office building, and just up over my right screen left, you're going to see some lights, and then just to the hallway there, the double doors, that's the entrance to the secure facility, or SCIF, where Cohen is testifying. This morning, Cohen took a route that effectively shielded him from the media. He arrived here in the basement. He came up through freight elevator, according to our producer, Jason Donner. And then he came up onto the second floor and he walked along that hallway briefly. He did not take reporters' questions. One focus this morning is on Cohen's testimony in 2017 when he told the same Senate committee that discussions about a Trump Tower Moscow project ended in January 2016. The timeline here is important because the special counsel found that those discussions went until June, and they prosecuted Cohen for lying to Congress over that issue. So lawmakers today want to understand why Cohen would lie about that when the underlying act, the business deal, was not a criminal offense, and whether Cohen took the initiative to lie or whether he was directed to do so. This morning, the White House press secretary issued a statement that reads in part, quote, "Disgraced felon Michael Cohen is going to prison for lying to Congress and making other false statements. It's laughable that anyone would take a convicted liar like Cohen at his word, and pathetic to see him given yet another opportunity to spread his lies." Earlier today, we heard from lawmakers and we asked them about Cohen's credibility, and the response divided along party lines.
What I intend to keep focused on is untangling the very complicated financial arrangements between Donald Trump and Russia.
I'm just not impressed with Mr. Cohen. He lied to us once. Anything he says, I think that the American people need to be very, very skeptical about any allegations.
The Republican chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Richard Burr, told Fox late last night that he's going to have hard questions with Cohen about why he lied to Congress in the first place. And he also told Fox that this committee is really in the end game now. Cohen is one of a handful of witnesses they want to hear from before they wrap up their investigation, Sandra.
All right, Catherine Herridge, thank you for all that. Live on the Hill for us, Congressman Mark Green now joins us, the Tennessee Republican, a member of the House Oversight Committee. Cohen is testifying before that committee tomorrow in a public hearing. So we will see what you ask then. Do you want to tell us now, Congressman? Good morning.
Well, I just think and thanks, Sandra, for having me on the show. I just think it's crazy that the first witness that the Democrats call to testify before Congress is a guy who's been convicted or pled guilty to lying to Congress. I mean, it's just crazy. This guy's lied to the IRS 5 different times, lied to banks in order to get loans, to pay off loans. He even lied about delivering his own child. His wife had to correct the record on that one. So this guy, and if you read the Southern District of New York, the prosecutors and the report there, it paints the picture of a narcissistic bully who can't tell the truth. And this is who the Democrats want to put in front of us in the Oversight Committee. It's just, it makes no sense. It's crazy. And we're just going to continue to show America the truth about who Michael Cohen is.
And we saw the statement from Sarah Sanders at the White House saying it's laughable, along the same lines as your point, that they would call this witness before Congress one that's going to jail for lying to Congress. So it sounds like the Republican strategy will be to continue to question the credibility of this witness. What do you expect from Democrats in that committee hearing tomorrow?
I think they're going to be asking all sorts of questions about the president. I mean, for them, this isn't about the truth. If it were about the truth, we'd have a different witness. This is about trying their best to discredit the president of the United States. They're going to be asking all sorts of questions. And you can look at how they narrowed the scope of this thing. They want Mr. Cohen to talk about the president's taxes, his debts. So we've got a guy who lied to the IRS 5 times, who's going to tell us about the president's taxes. I mean, it just makes no sense. I guess it's sort of their modus operandi, though. I mean, they took a fake dossier that was created to get an FBI investigation, and now they're going to get a fake witness in front of the Oversight Committee, and to do what? I don't know. Certainly not find the truth.
Yeah, and according to the Wall Street Journal this morning, they're putting out that Cohen plans to testify that Trump engaged in criminal conduct while in office. Others are reporting the same, and even reveal some of his Trump's private financial documents. We'll see where all that goes. Meanwhile, a vote today on this resolution to stop the president's declaration of an emergency to fund the border wall at the southern border. What are your expectations for this year? Mark Meadows appeared on the program a little bit earlier this morning talking about the hypocrisy on the part of Democrats. Listen to that first, and then we'll get your reaction.
It was the Democrats who were applauding President Barack Obama for this same executive authority when he did it in 2010. And yet here they are. They become righteous all of a sudden. If they're serious and if Senator Tillis is serious, let's get together and rein in the executive power once and for all. I'm all on board. But until then, the statute is clear. This president has the ability to do that.
Congressman Green.
Absolutely. The 1976 Act gives the president the authority to do this. I mean, it's obvious he does. 59 previous declarations, 31 still in effect. I mean, it is hypocrisy. Even I just came from the Oversight Committee, Sandra, and the Democrats are issuing all these subpoenas and saying, oh, this is an emergency. We've got to get this information about separating children. But interestingly enough, it wasn't an emergency during the Obama administration when it was happening, but now suddenly it's an emergency. And oh, by the way, well, didn't the president just declare an emergency and you want to go against that? So what is it? Is it an emergency or is it not? I mean, their hypocrisy is mind-numbing.
All right, Congressman Mark Green, and obviously want to get in there that Thom Tillis, a Republican in the Senate, when it gets there, he says that he would vote in favor of this resolution to block the president's declaration of this national emergency. So you wonder who else is out there on your side. Final thoughts there. I've got to leave it there. A few seconds left, sir.
Real quickly, on the House side, we're all with the president. This should be a national emergency.
All right. Congressman Mark Green, thanks for your time this morning. Good to have you.
Thanks, Sandra.
All right. We head back out to Bill in Hanoi with the latest there. Bill?
You know, Sandra, every day, I mean, the news cycle right now, it's, you know, you can't distinguish the taste of the news cycle. And I was just watching there during your interview there in the lower corner of the screen. You've got a Michael Cohen hearing tomorrow that we will be watching in a split screen from half a world away. Yeah. And you've got a president who's negotiating over nuclear weapons, and you've got members of Congress who are questioning his private lawyer about payments that were made or allegedly made during the campaign. And this is really going to be an interesting juxtaposition, how the White House plays it, how Republicans respond to it. There was this saying about, you know, you stop at the water's edge when the president's overseas, and you just wonder how far this hearing will go tomorrow. But we're watching that here, and the world is watching here in Hanoi to see how this summit goes, to see what happens between Chairman Kim and President Trump when things get underway tomorrow. The president will meet with the Vietnamese leadership tomorrow. On tomorrow night, around 22 hours from now, we'll see the two men come together. They'll share a meal here in Hanoi. So reaction from the Korean Peninsula as our coverage continues. Live in Vietnam tonight, it is 11:12 in the evening. Coming up.
Test, pray, and cower has been upended by President Trump. We've put real economic pressure on the North Koreans. We've built out a global coalition. One of the critiques is that we go it alone. We've built out the world's coalition to communicate to Chairman Kim that now is the time, now is the moment, and I hope we'll make real progress on that this week.
President Trump's former attorney Michael Cohen today testifying behind closed doors before the Senate Intelligence Committee. Cohen will also speak to two House panels this week, including a public hearing tomorrow. Byron York is chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner and a Fox News contributor. Byron, good morning to you.
Good morning, Sandra.
1 week, 3 hearings. What are these hearings exactly? What are they designed to do?
It's a lot of Michael Cohen. As you said, he's speaking to the Senate Intelligence Committee today, and he's speaking to the House Intelligence Committee on Thursday. Both of those hearings are expected to focus on Russia and the Trump-Russia matter and investigation, and both of them are secret. They're behind closed doors. We won't know what Cohen was asked or what he said. Now, tomorrow he's supposed to testify before the House Oversight Committee, and that committee hearing is public. So we'll get to hear his testimony. But on that one, the chairman, Elijah Cummings, a Democrat, has ordered that they not talk about Russia. The chairman wants to talk about the Stormy Daniels payment, or the Trump Foundation, or the president's tax returns, or the president's business practices, or a lot of other topics. He actually released a list of topics he wanted to discuss, but he won't talk about Russia. So it's almost as if the whole thing is designed for us not to learn anything new about the Trump-Russia matter.
Wow, that says a lot when we will be learning a lot more in coming days as to how lawmakers plan to question Michael Cohen. The closed-door hearings, we'll see. Meanwhile, the White House is saying this. Sarah Sanders this morning, disgraced felon Michael Cohen's going to prison for lying to Congress and making other false statements. She writes, sadly, he will go before Congress this week, and we can expect more of the same. It's laughable that anybody would take a convicted liar like Cohen at his word, and pathetic to see him given yet another opportunity to spread his lies. So what you're seeing here is continued questioning of his credibility as a witness in these hearings, Byron. And Andy McCarthy appeared on this program earlier and said this about that.
If the prosecutors had thought he was a valuable, credible witness, they would have completed a cooperation agreement with him. They would have gotten over whatever hump there was in the negotiations and signed him up as a full-fledged cooperator. They declined to do that, and I have to think they did that because they didn't think he was a very useful or valuable witness.
So what about that, Byron?
Well, the White House statement is exactly what you would expect from the White House, and it is indeed a little odd that a man who has just pleaded guilty to lying to Congress is now going to be welcomed to testify before Congress, before the very lawmakers he pleaded guilty to lying to. So expect Republicans on the House committee to make a big deal about that tomorrow. They'll probably be bringing it up every time they can. The fact is, Cohen also, in addition to pleading guilty to lying to Congress, pleaded guilty to evading taxes. He had an elaborate scheme involving taxi medallions in New York City and defrauding a bank as well. So Cohen, there's a lot for Republicans to talk about with Cohen if they want to try to undermine his credibility.
If anybody throws a wrench in the works, you say it will be during the Oversight Committee hearing tomorrow, and it will be Republicans. How so, Byron? Final thoughts.
Well, the chairman has said we're not going to talk about Russia. But, of course, when the microphone goes to the Republicans, they can ask what they want to ask. So, Michael Cohen is mentioned in the so-called Trump dossier 24 times. He was obviously a key player in this whole Trump Tower Moscow matter. That's part of what he lied to Congress about. So there's nothing to stop Republicans from asking Cohen about Russia matters. We'll see if he answers, and we'll see if the chairman decides to side with Cohen or his fellow lawmakers.
A lot of uncertainty heading into all of that. And that public hearing, of course, will happen tomorrow. It'll be happening during these hours tomorrow. Byron York, great to hear from you this morning. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sandra.
Here in Hanoi, final preparations well underway now in Vietnam as President Trump gets ready for his second summit with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Both leaders are now here in Hanoi, Vietnam. People in South Korea watching this summit closely. We'll get a live report from Seoul to let you know what they're thinking and feeling about the second time around.
We have a chance for the total denuclearization of an area of the world that was very dangerous.
Much has changed in Vietnam, but the one-party communist system has not. We found this billboard in central Hanoi near the government center. You can see the hammer and the sickle that represents the Communist Party. At the bottom, our translator tells us that the message is to the people of this ward that they can achieve the socio-economic targets that the government has set out for them. Now, again, we're in the capital city of Hanoi, northern part of the country, but the hammer and the sickle that represents the party is common. Very interesting how they've tried to keep the party in control and allow the economy to be flexible and to grow, and grow it has. And what the Vietnamese government will argue is that the Communist Party still runs things, but the people under the wing and under the rule of the party have been able to make a profitable living for themselves. And there is evidence of that is quite clear, especially over the past 10 years or so. Vietnam it's a boomtown. Meanwhile, the summit tomorrow closely watched in Seoul, South Korea. Koreans throughout the entire peninsula watching to see how Chairman Kim reacts to President Trump and what they're able to get done. Greg Palcott has that part of the story. He's live in Seoul, South Korea. And Greg, what reaction are you getting from there tonight? Good evening.
Good evening, Bill. As you can imagine, all eyes here are on the Trump-Kim summit. After Singapore, the folks here in Seoul are hoping for a bit more substance There's a lot at stake here. Now, with President Trump in Hanoi, they're waiting to see if he will deliver in one of his big bargaining chips a declaration of the end of the Korean War. You'll recall that fighting stopped here some 65 years ago only with an armistice. He might come through with that. And also waiting to see what North Korean leader Kim Jong-un might give back in return. There is talk that he could agree to shutting down his main nuclear processing center in the north. That could lower the temperatures a bit. But in fact, here in Seoul, not everybody's happy. There was a small protest in front of the U.S. Embassy. People concerned that North Korea's human rights abuses are not being addressed at this summit, just as they were not addressed in Singapore. The reports are, Bill, that something like 120,000 people are in political gulags in North Korea.
You've spoken with a lot of people there, Greg, including someone who's got a special interest in what happens at the summit and the outcome. What did you hear?
Absolutely. The man I talked to is a former Republican congressman from California. His name is Jay Kim. He was born in Seoul in 1939, so he lived through World War II. He lived through the Korean War before coming to the U.S. and becoming the first Korean American in the House of Representatives. Here is what he thinks about a possible declaration, the end of the Korean War.
Symbolically important, really. The war has been ended. I mean, nobody's attacking anyone yet. Symbolically important. But other than that, I think it's been ended anyway, but symbolic reasons.
He said it would feel better, feel safer, in fact, if that declaration was made. I think a lot of people would agree with that. President Trump, he gives a lot of credit to, but a lot of people here in South Korea understand it could go either way in the next couple of days. Dicey times. Back to you.
Indeed, 1953, Greg, and still counting. Thank you, sir. In Seoul, South Korea, Greg Palcott.
Thank you.
Sandra.
Meanwhile, here at home, a big ordeal on the rails. An Amtrak train stuck motionless. Its passengers trapped for more than a day. The status of the rescue efforts there next. Plus, the historic summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un, where they are set to address the world's biggest security challenge, North Korea's nuclear program. What will it take for Kim to give up his arsenal? Congressman Adam Kinzinger will be here live with his take.
What's going to happen, I can't tell you. I think eventually it would, but I can't tell you. And I'm not in a rush. I don't want to rush anybody. I just don't want testing. As long as there's no testing, we're happy.
Fox News alert: nearly 200 people trapped on an Amtrak train for more than 30 hours. Finally on the move again, the train came to a standstill Sunday evening after hitting a fallen tree on the tracks near Oak Ridge, Oregon. Dan Springer is live in Seattle with the latest. What stories are coming out of here, Dan?
Sandra, what a travel nightmare. There has to be a lot of relieved people on that train, which was stuck on the tracks for just over 36 hours. This happened in Oak Ridge, Oregon, which is about 40 miles southeast of Eugene, in the foothills of the Cascade Mountains. The Amtrak train left Seattle at 9:45 Sunday morning, headed for Los Angeles, but hit a tree at 6 o'clock that night. The tree had fallen onto the tracks due to a near-record snowstorm. The National Weather Service says Oak Ridge received somewhere between a foot and 2 feet of snow over a 24-hour period starting Sunday. The weight of the snow toppled trees all over central Oregon. In fact, it knocked out power to much of Eugene and all of Oak Ridge, and that's why Amtrak decided to keep the 183 passengers and crew on the train rather than take them to a hotel in the town, which didn't have any power. For the first 7 hours, the Amtrak crew tried to repair the train and get it moving again, but that didn't work. So Union Pacific, which owns the tracks, began clearing the way to get an engine to the stranded train. After 30 hours or so, they finally reached the train, and it's now headed back to Eugene and eventually all the way back to Portland. There were no injuries reported, and it looks like the passengers were trying to make the best of it. One woman started playing her ukulele. But we also hear that food started running out, along with other supplies for the kids on board. Several passengers posted their stories on social media.
They just did an announcement on that they're making diapers for some of the kids that are on the train. They're not telling us anything except that you can't get off.
But again, their ordeal will soon be over. Amtrak just released a statement saying it will provide refunds and other compensation to the passengers. Sandra?
A rough trip for those folks. Dan Springer, thank you.
Yeah.
Stage is now set for the second meeting we've seen in about 8 months between President Donald Trump and Chairman Kim Jong-un. Both leaders are in Hanoi, arriving over the past 12 hours. Screen right, that happened around noontime today. Screen left happened about 2 hours and 30 minutes ago. Can they make progress on denuclearization? With me now, Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger from Illinois, also serves on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And sir, thank you for your time. You've got 28,000 American troops in South Korea. If you're President Trump and you fly halfway around the world to Hanoi, what makes this trip a success in his mind?
That's a good question. I think success is progress. So I don't know exactly what that progress will be. There's a number of steps between just simply not, shooting nuclear missiles over Japan to get to where we need to be, which is verifiable, complete destruction of North Korea's nuclear program. And so, as we remember with the Iran nuclear deal, it wasn't played out in public, but it was over a period of a couple years that they came to an agreement, a flawed agreement, by the way, and a bad deal, but it took that long. This is something that's being played out on the national stage. So there's going to be a lot of people that want immediate response. I don't think we're going to get there to an immediate final solution to this whole thing. But I think when it's all said and done, if he can walk out and say, here's some new steps I've gotten, here's promises from North Korea, then I think we're going to be in a better place.
I'm hearing that there's going to be a resolution in the House side on behalf of your Democratic colleagues to try and introduce a resolution that would bring about a peace deal. The armistice has been in place for 60 years. That would reunite to a degree the peninsula. Is that something you would go for at this point?
I think at this point, Congress shouldn't be the one introducing a peace deal. I think that needs to be handled by the administration as part of their progress to get to complete, verifiable destruction of North Korea's nuclear program. And at the point that that is possible, because of the different steps that have been achieved, the carrots and the sticks, then I'd be supportive of it. But for Congress to just unilaterally do that, I think would be a mistake, because we're not in all these meetings with Kim Jong-un and with Donald Trump.
Okay, I'm just watching this develop, and we'll see where it goes there. Meanwhile, you were just at the border, had a bit of a deployment yourself. What do you think you learned down there that you want people to understand?
Well, I think it's very important to understand a national emergency isn't about the immigration issue. It's about the drugs, and it's about the human trafficking. I saw both of those regularly every flight. You'd see situations where groups would be brought over by coyotes, the people that work for the drug cartels, that pay the drug cartels to have these people bring them over. The first sign of trouble, these coyotes abandon the group that doesn't know their way around this big, terrible, rugged terrain. There are drugs there. In many cases, they drop their bundles and run away from Border Patrol. Or when we capture drugs, it would be things like 70 pounds of meth. This is a real problem. And for the Democrats to pull even National Guard assets, which, by the way, this is my fourth deployment, 3 of them were under President Obama, for them to pull National Guard doesn't say that they support technology, because the National Guard is that technology. It shows that they want open borders, and I hope they reconsider a lot of that.
The national emergency was called. Did you support that move? Is that the right call at the moment?
I think it is. I went down there neutral on the question. I wanted to get a firsthand look, and I came back very convinced it's the right thing to do. This is a national emergency. This is threatening the American people, and it's not just the desperate immigrants. It's the issue of drugs and human trafficking. Do we want to tackle drugs and human trafficking? I think so. This is the right way to do it. A lot comes over the unregulated border.
In about 23 hours, sir, in a House office building there on Capitol Hill, Michael Cohen's going to tell America something. What do you think we're going to learn tomorrow?
Now, I don't know. We know that Michael Cohen has lied to Congress before. So the question is, will he lie to Congress again? I've seen reports of what they think he's going to say. I'll be interested to watch, but understanding through the filter of Michael Cohen has a history of lying to Congress. Democrats are dead set on moving towards impeachment. No matter what the facts are, I think this is the beginning of their process. What happens when you lose control of the House? Ultimately, the Democrats are going to have to answer to the American people in 2 years for whatever they decide to proceed with.
Cohen's hearing publicly. Well, privately it goes on today, but publicly it's 22 hours away. What an interesting split screen it will be tomorrow. Sir, thank you for your time today. Adam Kinzinger, the Republican from Illinois. You bet. We'll talk real soon. Thank you, sir. 22 before the hour now. Back to Sandra in New York.
Thanks, Bill. Well, the 2020 Democratic candidates for the presidency are lining up, but a potential frontrunner isn't even in the race yet. But sources say former Vice President Joe Biden is close to throwing his hat in the ring. Peter Doocy's live from Newark, Delaware. Peter, any news on that front yet?
Not yet, but the former vice president is going to speak here in a little while. And if he announces something soon, then the primary discussion could soon shift away from policies impacting people here, like Medicare for All and the Green New Deal, and more towards foreign policy issues, because that's what he's been talking a lot about lately.
I'll just say, is under attack by an administration that views the EU as a problem and rooting for its demise, which is the dumbest thing in the world.
As vice president, Biden became one of the most relatable politicians in the country, sharing lots of things that others in the field right now probably wouldn't.
Don't hold it against me that I don't own a single stock or bond. Don't hold it, I have no savings account. But I got a great pension and I got a good salary.
And the one way Biden might stand out the most from the rest of the pack is that declared Democrats have adopted a very soft approach towards President Trump.
Patriotism is love of country, and you can't love your country if you don't love your fellow countrymen and women.
And that is completely different than the way that Biden has approached the president, because he is the only one in the field so far who has joked about fighting him.
They asked me, would I like to debate this gentleman? And I said, no. I said, if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
President Trump responded to that at the time about a year ago, saying that that fight would not last long, and there could be a whole lot more where that came from, or not, between now and November 2020, if Biden decides to get in. Sandra?
Wait and see. Peter Doocy, thank you. We will get more from Bill live in Vietnam in just a moment. But first, to some other big news on the world stage this morning as Vice President Pence announces new sanctions on the Maduro regime in Venezuela. Senator Cory Gardner serves on the Foreign Relations Committee. His thoughts on the latest move to oust a dictator. Next.
What the world saw this weekend is what the people of Venezuela have been living with for years. And that is the oppression and brutality of the Maduro regime and their henchmen who use force and violence and intimidation.
Effective today, the United States will impose additional sanctions on regime officials. These men work to block aid for people in need and suppress peaceful protests, while their tyrant danced in Caracas. Their actions will not go unpunished.
That's Vice President Mike Pence announcing new sanctions against the regime of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Pence traveling to Colombia yesterday, where he pledged U.S. support for opposition leader Juan Guaido and $56 million in additional aid for Venezuelans. Senator Cory Gardner serves on the Foreign Relations Committee. He joins us now. Senator, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Based on our actions in recent days, is the United States applying enough pressure on the Maduro regime?
We're applying appropriate pressure now. It's building as we gain more allies in our coalition against the socialist dictator Maduro. We're going to see our efforts succeed. This is a tyrant, a leader who cares only about himself and his elite cronies, somebody who is denied